It's the LaMelo Ball episode. After being the talk of the town last week, I discuss what his ceiling still could be, what the height of LaMelo Ball is in the NBA. That's all today on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your pods, and that includes YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more. As the playoffs are over in the NBA, they're winding down in other sports. The sports, they stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So I'm a little late on this episode, but I wanted to go through the Summer League recap yesterday. I still wanted to get to the LaMelo conversation, and we got to it a little bit with Zach Lowe's write-up, but there was a lot to chew on with the LaMelo stuff last week. So he was the talk of the town after Zach Lowe wrote a blurb on ESPN.com that you can still go find, just about the WTF teams in the NBA, as he calls them. He also talked about the Hornets and LaMelo on the Low Post podcast. And Melo was featured most prominently, both in the write-up and in the long-form convo that he had with Seth Partnow. No surprise, LaMelo's the max player on the roster. He only played in 58 games combined the last two seasons. So it still feels like there's a lot of unknown in what he could become. And even besides the injuries, there's the reputation out there for LaMelo that at worst, he doesn't care enough. And at best, he cares, but he's just not that winning player Charlotte paid him to be. Despite that reputation, Zach Lowe said on his pod and the blurb on ESPN that he's not ready to give up on such a talented, soon-to-be 23-year-old. LaMelo is actually going to turn 23 in late August. So the soon-to-be 23-year-old, yeah, man, you just don't find that type of player very often. With that kind of size, with an already bona fide shot, and with the elite vision that he possesses in the NBA, all wrapped into one. Like, I agree. I don't want to give up on LaMelo either. And even if you understand you're not giving up on him, moving on from him is probably the better way to phrase that. The problem is, man, like, we just haven't seen him play. Like, getting to the obvious stuff, people forget because we just haven't seen him play a lot. And even more than that, when he does play, I was doing some research on this. When he does play, we don't see him play a long time. So Melo played 75 games his second season in the league. That's a lot of basketball games. It's a ton of them. He suffered an ankle injury in October of that 2022 preseason. And after he suffered that ankle injury, he returned for 3 games. Then he goes right back out. 19 games, goes right back out. 14, gone. 15, out. Last time we saw him on the court, he returned for 7 consecutive games, and that was it. 3, 19, 14, 15, 7. We can't get LaMelo to play 20 games. The last time we saw him play 20 games consecutively, we have to go back to the start of March in 2022 until the Hornets got bounced in the play-in tournament. Haven't seen him play. And it's not in the, oh, people forget Melo was a bucket type of way. I think people really did forget how we used to talk about LaMelo. We were having big monster conversations about him. Could he be the first MVP in Hornets history? At the time, the top 75 player list was coming out. I remember, mentioning Alonzo Mourning as a guy that was really the best shot for the Hornets to have anybody sneak in there that played at the peak of their power with the team. Mourning was honorable mention, but LJ wasn't going to make it. We know Kemba wasn't. Could LaMelo, not top 75, whatever that number might be in the future, how high could this thing go? He wins Rookie of the Year in a year where Anthony Edwards started to look like a beast at the end. Tyrese Halliburton was putting up all these efficient numbers, and he just kept winning Rookie of the Month after Rookie of the Month before he got hurt. It used to be the complete opposite how we used to talk about this guy. And he wasn't just a carnival act, nor was he really even a polarizing player like he is now. Wasn't all that polarizing at all. Both narratives referenced by Zach Lowe, by the way, how he was a carnival act and he's polarizing. LaMelo was considered a legitimate winning player. And I found this write-up from Tim Bontemps on the LaMelo Rookie of the Year award. And here's what Tim wrote. Any doubts on LaMelo's transition into the NBA proved to be unfounded, as Ball averaged 15.7 points, 5.9 rebounds, 6.1 assists, and 1.6 steals per game for Charlotte his rookie year, shooting 35.2% from three-point range, and immediately, get this, contributing to winning basketball in a way rookies rarely do. It's almost like ESPN were trying to get out in front of what they knew was on its way. A bunch of takes about LaMelo stats, like representing this Ben & Jerry's pint of empty calories, when in reality, these stats, these moments, they led to more wins for Charlotte. Tim Bontemps wasn't the only one saying stuff like this. In fact, we can go back to 2021 and ESPN's Brian Windhorst said it on the mothership.
Yeah, I know it's difficult with LaMelo, but I saw what I needed to see, and I intend to vote him for Rookie of the Year. Now, Anthony Edwards and Tyrese Halliburton's cases are not done, and so that's why we wait until the end of the season to vote. But to me, the defining category for a rookie to prove his value is, can he impact winning and losing? That sounds like a simple statement, but that is very rare that happens. Really only a handful of guys in the last 10, 15 years I can name. And I really honestly believe that LaMelo influenced winning and losing with the Hornets this year. His performances in so many of those games were the difference maker.
Think about how different that is. Like, that is so different from what we hear now, where national pundits are talking about how, I just don't see it with LaMelo. The first thing I would do if I got the job that Jeff Peterson did, which was head decision maker personnel-wise, would be to shop LaMelo. That's the first thing I would do. It has to be the health risk. I know there are limits to his game in the way that there are limits to every game if you poke and prod enough. I think people, like, when people say, oh yeah, we forget, I really actually think it just is wiped from everyone's memory how we used to talk about this guy. And I haven't, because I used to have to cover it every single day. And that's what I'm still holding out hope for, despite LaMelo just not seeing the floor all that much. So the question is LaMelo still a winning player? Let's get into that. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast, what can LaMelo do next year to salvage nationally and majority of the reputation that he has with a lot of NBA fans right now? We'll get to that in just a moment on Locked On Hornets. Before we get to that, though, I did want to tell you how this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part isn't guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. If it doesn't fit your ride every time, you get your money back. I'm sorry, it is guaranteed to fit. And if it doesn't, you get your money back. I apologize, eBay Motors. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. More Locked On Hornets coming up in just a second. So the next question is LaMelo still a winning player? Feels like that's what people are trying to figure out now, both nationally and certainly with the Hornets. If the Stan answer, or the stancer, if you will, I like it. If the stancer to that question is yes, the hater answer to that question is no. The logical answer is probably in between. I don't know. We haven't seen him in the right circumstances yet. really, we haven't seen many circumstances at all the last 2 years because of the health history, the injury history. Let's look at some of the numbers when he is on the court, though. According to Cleaning the Glass, which does not account for garbage time, the Hornets have been better with LaMelo on the floor the last 3 years overall. And if they've been better overall, they've been better by a lot offensively with him on the floor each of the last 4 seasons. Every season LaMelo has been in the NBA, the Hornets have been like various forms of certainly better to dramatically better when he's handling the basketball. If you go to dunks and threes, you look at his offensive estimated plus minus, they're ridiculous. He ranks in the 97th percentile, 94th percentile, and 95th percentile in each of the last 3 years when it comes to his offensive EPM. Just elite offensive ranks. His overall EPM, 93rd, 87th, 91st percentiles, each of the last 3 seasons. Just to be clear, that accounts for the poor defensive numbers that he posts too. Despite those poor defensive numbers, the overall EPM percentiles are still very, very, very high. So LaMelo has shown when he's on the court, the Hornets are much, much better offensively, and they're better overall. They have a better chance of winning with him orchestrating the offense than they do without him orchestrating it. Do with all of this what you will too, but the last time we saw the Hornets make the play-in, have any type of success in the regular season, they finished above 500. LaMelo was the only all-star on that squad. And that was the best roster since Borrego took over and the most healthy one in the last 3 years. That's also still with LaMelo posting poor rim numbers on top of the defensive issues that we know about, which I absolutely believe he can improve on. LaMelo's not a finished product, not even turning 23 yet. That seems like all NBA caliber stuff to me. That's the type of potential that we're still working with in LaMelo Ball. And that was the question we were asking going back to last segment, going back to his rookie season. So another thing I wonder is if he has to improve so much defensively to be considered a top 15 player by year's end, or I guess how much he has to improve at all defensively for him to get one of those all-NBA spots. It doesn't seem so to receive one of those third team spots. If you're going to be a minus defensively, then you have to put up monster numbers on the other end of the court. So obviously it would help if he got noticeably a clear gap better than Halliburton and Trae Young. And maybe you think he already is. Like Trae Young can get pretty terrible on that end of the floor, but you get the idea. The NBA will give a third team nod to crazy high usage guards who like flirt with triple doubles, score more than 25 points per game. They'll do that. Check for LaMelo in every single one of those categories. So Tyrese last year got a nod. De'Aaron Fox was third team All-NBA the year before. Trae Young was third team All-NBA 3 years ago. Even John Morant, he made All-NBA second team 2 years ago. So it's not the defense that has to improve too much for him to see one of these spots, even though, of course, everyone would love to see him improve at it. And the team, right? Team success. The Pacers got to the conference finals this year. They were in a nice spot to do so at the end of the regular season. We know about Trae Young having built a foundation already with that Atlanta Hawks run to the conference finals. And De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, those guys having dug the Kings out of what was just the trenches in the Western Conference, climbing themselves out of those trenches. Yeah, like the winning, that'll help too. And even with these teams just finding their way out of the basement, it's not even the fact that they're going all the way to the championship. It's an unexpected type of successful year. That's what also has to change for him to receive an All-NBA nod. But to me, it's not even just like individually, right? If we're looking at what he has to improve at, it's not even so much the defensive numbers. We have to go back to the poor rim numbers. That's just what it is. That's the weakness that suggests he makes an All-NBA team if he improves there. Every one of those guys that I just mentioned, except for Trae Young, are various forms of elite at getting to the bucket or finishing at the bucket once they get there. And even Trae, who isn't particularly great at both, his best season finishing at the rim in the NBA, it just so happens to coincide with his lone All-NBA achievement. LaMelo, he even gets there well enough. It's just the numbers on his accuracy. They've been consistently really bad compared to other players at his position. So I know I sound like a broken record with this stuff. I know Zach was talking about this too. It's pretty clear that's what has to improve with LaMelo, but just I want people to understand, like, there's also some numbers to suggest that, yeah, we'd love to see LaMelo improve at the rim. But if he does that, now we're talking about like top 15 status if he starts hitting with better accuracy. So surpassing all-star level, which he has won already in his career, his second season in the NBA at 21 years old. So now can we get to that all NBA level? And if that's the case, I guess the question then becomes, whose team is it? We'll get to that in a moment. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast, we'll get to the battle between LaMelo and Brandon Miller. Nay, we'll get to even if there is a battle between LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. That's still to come here on Locked On Hornets. Before we get to that battle between the two young stars, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. A big appreciation for them as always. I love sports. I love them so much. I never really want them to stop. But as the playoffs are over in the NBA, we start to take a break in the WNBA, getting ready for Team USA to take the court. We get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want, and all I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. It's that simple. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Plenty more Locked On Hornets to come in the last segment. Coming up next, LOH. Okay, so let's have that conversation. The team. Whose team is it? The battle between Brandon Miller and LaMelo. Yeah, I can hear the take artist salivating now. I guess we have to figure out what that means, though, first. And I guess we have to assign value to it. Do we assign value to that debate? Does it mean who the best player is in Charlotte? Like, if we answer that question, then we find out the answer to whose team it is. Do we have to view this as who becomes the vocal leader? I think sometimes we try to bring that into the definition every once in a while. Who takes the big shots in crunch time? I remember that being asked of the Boston 3 party, and everybody seems to buy in, right? Like, I guess another way to definitively answer this is that the team decides this is our king, and then they trade the other guy, which right now, if you were to go with that example, the more talked about tradable player is LaMelo. I think that discussion is going to be hard to figure out between LaMelo and Brandon, who balled out his rookie season. But I also say that as a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing, and that it's going to be hard to figure out because I'm saying that more for us, the fan base. On the low post, Zach and Seth Partnow, they went back and forth on this, and Zach was saying how this discussion for a lot of teams often gets overblown by media. And we can just go to Boston this past season for a great example of that. Like, how much does it matter? The Jays embrace each other. They won a title because of it. Who cares? And by the way, good thing we just got the assistant from the squad that had to navigate that on their way to a championship. I'll take Charles Lee if he knows how to navigate that whatsoever. Maybe there wasn't anything to navigate. I don't know. The good news is I think Melo and Brandon right now can play really well together. It's why a lot of people wanted Brandon Miller with that second overall selection. I think for the most part, they really complement one another. Like, again, I'd like to see rim pressure from both of them, if not at least one. You're not really getting that from either one, but these guys can wreak havoc in the backcourt. Like, offensively, they're just going to be hell to deal with, and they're both huge guards. So, like, even defensively, you just put your hands up. It's going to be hard to see over them and make passes for, I mean, they're going to be taller. Are they in the 99th percentile in the NBA when it comes to big backcourts? If you're starting 6'7" LaMelo Ball at point guard, if you're starting Brandon Miller at the 2, who is like, what, close to 6'10", I mean, just a monster. Who's taller than that? Is there a bigger backcourt in the NBA? Probably not. So it is going to be hard if you just throw your hands up. Like that might even be half the battle. Finding a way to stay in front, throw your hands up, and then if they beat you, then you're hoping Mark Williams is there to clean things up in the paint once the opposing player gets there. So yeah, like they're going to be working really well with one another. Seth Partnow was going through some of the teams who play the same style as what you would consider their lead dog. Like a Luka team is going to play like Luka. Same thing with LeBron, Giannis, Harden. You get the idea. Like we know Melo isn't that. He's not some of the best offensive players like maybe the history of the NBA has ever seen. But also just in the style and in the spirit of what Seth was saying, it's not like Melo is out of that universe entirely. A Melo offense is going to complement LaMelo. Like an offense led by LaMelo, it's going to do a lot of the stuff that he does well. It's going to get out in transition. Charles Lee has said this a bunch. In the short time that he's been the head coach, how many times has he said Melo will set the pace? That's been the biggest thing he talks about when discussing the fifth-year guard. The good news is a lot of the stuff Brandon does well, or excuse me, LaMelo does well. Brandon complements some of that. Brandon also great in transition, either with secondary ball handling in this case, paired with LaMelo, or just running the floor with him, and then LaMelo hits him at the exact right spot. Brandon can knock down those shots on kickouts. I think Brandon will benefit more from Melo on the court than the other way around, but I do think Brandon's gravity will still help Melo a ton. So both will have a lot to gain from the other one being on the court at the same time. I think if we're looking for disaster potential, I don't know why you'd be looking for it, but just hypothetically, bear with me. If you were looking for some disaster potential, I think this goes sideways in the coming years if Brandon wants the ball more. Like if he becomes this ultra competitive, give me the ball, get the bleep out of my way type of guy, not only in just clutch moments, but for stretches of games, then maybe we see some problems. And the other thing is, people love seeing Brandon yell at the vets. And like, I mean, even defensively, right? There were some clips last year of Brandon yelling at vets and then like himself getting beat, man to man, which is fine. Like I care that he cares. That's fantastic. I think both of these guys care a lot. So that's what's phenomenal about this. But if he starts yelling at the vets and he yells at LaMelo, who's sitting there with 25, 7, and 8, but maybe he doesn't get back in transition and he doesn't maybe a few times. Brandon snaps. He just can't handle it anymore. Is Melo going to look at him sideways? Like, why? Who are you talking to? Like, I got, I got close to a triple double. I've been here longer. I got $200 million. Hey, you need to stop yelling at me after I've done all this to help the team win. And those might be a few concerns. I just don't think we'll have to worry about that until a couple of years from now. Like this is not a this year problem. Those are hypotheticals trying to throw, okay, if it goes bad, how would it go bad? Like those are the scenarios I would see happening if it were to happen at all. And in the grand scheme of things, like that even seems like a great problem to have. We just need to see both guys on the court. That's it. That's what we're hungry for. You have done the hard part. The first hard part is hitting on a player at all in the top three. Hitting on a player with all NBA potential, which I think LaMelo has. Hitting on one of those guys, that's the hard part. The harder part is to do it again. And they got lucky both times. They moved up in the lottery both times to get LaMelo and to get Brandon. And they have both of these guys. They made the right decision with Brandon last year, despite guys like me telling them to go with Scoot. They made the right decision last year in drafting Brandon Miller. They made the right decision when they drafted LaMelo Ball as he fell to them to number 3. And they're like, yeah, this guy's extremely gifted. There's clearly a tier, and we'll have a huge drop-off if we go with somebody like Onyeka Okongwu or Devin Vassell. They've done the hard part. Can we have this mini run that Washington had where you had the John Wall, Bradley Beal backcourt. I'm not saying they played all that similarly. In fact, I think LaMelo and John Wall are completely different basketball players. Bradley Beal and Brandon Miller probably compare pretty well with one another. But can you have that fun run where they get to the second round of the postseason, except then can the Hornets actually build on that in a way that the Wizards didn't? We want something. And the fact that you have these two guys on the court, on the team, we got to see them on the court. But the fact that you have these two guys on the team at the same time, and now we're all excited about what Jeff Peterson is doing. You have Charles Lee, who looks the part. He looks phenomenal, talking with media and being with Milwaukee, winning a championship, 60 games in Atlanta, 60 and a championship too in Boston. Yeah, that resume looks the part, as well as any other coaching hire out there that's been an assistant the last few years. Jeff Peterson was going to get a job somewhere. Charlotte just had a vacancy first, and they jumped on the opportunity, and also a little familiarity with Schlotkin doesn't hurt. We just need the LaMelo part to hit again, because it's already hit. We just need to see it on the court. And if that happens, that's why this team is going to be so fascinating to watch. And it has national NBA pundits questioning what in the hell are the Hornets going to do, because they have this prize jewel that's only played 58 games combined the last 2 years. But boy, do you remember what he did his second season? I do. And hopefully now everybody else does, after we go through some of the comments, some of the stats, and some of the accomplishments from LaMelo his first 2 seasons in the league. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. Remember to check me out on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. on Wes and Walker, Sports Radio 92.7 FM. Also, make sure you're still checking out Doug Branson's Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. There you can also find his sub text information. So go check that out as well. And then again, listen to us anywhere you get your pods. That includes YouTube. Subscribe. We're almost at 7,000 subscribers. So just get us there. Get us to 7,000, and then you can start subscribing at a leisurely rate after that. But let's get to 7,000, and then maybe we can go lax a little bit after that happens. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll be back with you tomorrow.